Good Sunday morning / afternoon, depending on where you all are. Welcome to the first ever episode of the Euroball Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Bernucca, along with one of the best in the business, one of the best people you will meet who loves European basketball, who covers it, best reporter in the game. We don't quite have a Woj term for him yet, but I think we will soon. Orazio of BasketNews. Orazio, how are you today?
It's great to be here, Andrew. Thank you for your kind words. And it's good to finally be together for this podcast. I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, and now we finally have the chance to do it.
That's right. That's right. I think so. For everyone's background, I think Orazio and I started talking for the first time probably almost 6 years ago now. I was still in college. I can't. Were you university at the time, or were you done?
I was already done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. 6 years. So a lot has gone by since then. Orazio and I have been friends since pre-pandemic. So, but today's episode, just so everyone is aware, look, personally, I have enjoyed some of this EuroLeague break. I've been taking some time away from basketball for the first time all season. Before the break, I was in Spain for a week and went out to 3 games, which was a blast. But took this time to relax a little bit. Basketball's back in a few days. You know, we're going through FIBA Euro qualifiers right now. We had the domestic cups before that. Not going to talk about all that today. Orazio and I are going to dive into how we think the rest of this season is going to pan out potentially. We're going to make predictions. Mine have been published already. Orazio gets a sneak peek, so he's ready to jump all over anything I have wrong, which I'm sure is a lot of it, as it often is. We're going to run through the rankings, you know, top down. We're mainly going to talk about 15 through 3rd. But on that note, to start this thing, Orazio, so I have Real Madrid in first. I think we can agree. There's no way they're falling out of first place over the last 8 games. Correct?
Oh yeah, I don't think there's any chance about that. We can agree that at the end of the regular season, Real Madrid is still going to be at the top of the table.
Yeah. Not much to talk about there. You know, Campazzo MVP level season, even with their injuries, they just have so much depth. You know, they're the top of the league. They're going to be in the Final Four, almost guaranteed. You know, we'll see what happens then. But until then, you know, Real's storyline is pretty much written. Number 2, I have Barcelona. You know, look, I think they could fall out of second place, but they seem to have a pretty strong hold there. Their schedule isn't too crazy over the final 8 games. They're playing good basketball. You know, they're kind of back to what they were at the start of the season. They wavered a few times, but the offense is humming again. La Provitola is firing on all cylinders. Look, I still have concerns about that post defense come playoff times. You know, I like Hernan Gomez. I like Jan Vesely. They're good players. They're not rim protectors, right? And they don't really have anyone on the perimeter as a great point of attack defender. But for you, are you agreed? They're probably in second place when things wrap up and after round 34.
Yeah, I think that overall there's a good chance that they're going to be second at the end of the regular season. As you said, you know, their offense has been really, really good for a big chunk of the season. They had their ups and downs, of course, as I think it's natural with a team that has changed quite a bit this summer. You know, they made the important changes. They lost a couple of key players like Mirotic and Higgins, and they brought in some players that, especially at the EuroLeague level, were untested, like Jabari Parker, who is, of course, extremely talented player, but his first time in Europe, very particular kind of player, you know, is a very unique style in his way. So it wasn't that easy, you know, to predict them to be this good. But they are, you know, because offensively, this is a really good team. As you said, you know, La Provitola is having another fantastic season. Jan Vesely offensively has been amazing, and he recently signed a contract extension, which is a very good news for Barcelona. The kind of disappointing news has been the performance of Hernan Gomez, to be honest. You know, Willie, you know, he hasn't been the player that we used to know, especially at the FIBA level. You know, with the Spanish national team, he has often had really good performances. But at the EuroLeague level, he's really paying the fact that he's not playing really well defensively. His approach also, it didn't look really good in some games. Maybe, you know, there's been some speculation about the fact that the relationship between him and Coach Grimau is not perfect. I don't know if that's the only issue or if there are some other cases, but yeah, if there's an element that, he left me a little bit disappointed with this team so far, he has been the performances of Hernan Gomez. But yeah, I think there's good chances that they're going to be the second team at the end of the regular season. Although I do believe that at least one between Panathinaikos and Monaco can try to sneak in for that second position.
Yeah, definitely. We'll get into Panathinaikos and Monaco later. I'm happy you brought up Jabari. He's been it's very impressive. I mean, they signed him, and I thought it was classic case of nice name, too many injuries, too old.
Yeah.
He's not going to survive at this level. And like, no disrespect to him, EuroLeague's really tough competition to adjust to, especially with the language barrier. I mean, if you watch Barcelona games and you watch during the timeouts, like I do, like a sicko, which I'm sure you do as well. There's a translator with him the whole time, like kind of walking him through what Grimao is talking about. Grimao is still very fluent Spanish, probably Catalonian as well. He doesn't speak a ton of English. Jabari doesn't seem to have gotten there yet. And he's still adapting and making plays. I think the teammates are definitely a help there, right? Like Satoransky was in the NBA. Vesely was in the NBA. There are guys there who can bring him on board, but it's just another obstacle that in the process that I didn't even know about when he first got signed. And I was not confident in the signing in the first place, but he has been a multi-dimensional scorer for them. He can do spot up, catch and shoot three, which is great if they want to play a bigger lineup. And he can shift down to the four. He can attack guys in the post. He could take guys off the dribble from out on the perimeter as well. He's got that little mid-post game that he likes where they'll get him the ball sometimes. He's got his back to the guy. He's 14 to 16 feet out. He'll turn around, look for a little pull-up. And he could still, after all those knee injuries, finish with authority at the rim, which is really impressive.
Yeah.
I've liked Jabari a lot this season. Couldn't agree more on Hernan Gomez on the defensive end. When Barcelona went through that tough stretch this year where they lost to Milano and Alba Berlin, back to back, Milano, no Mirotic loss. I remember, going back and watching those games, and I mean, the defensive breakdowns, a lot of which started with Hernan Gomez, they were unbelievable. And look, I know James Nagy is young. I'm not going to have some hot take here of James Nagy should start playing 15 minutes a night and that's going to fix all of Barcelona's defense. That's not true. There's obviously a lot that I don't know that's going on behind the scenes there, but Jasikevičius, I think, found minutes for Nagy last season for this reason, right? I mean, he just needed some help with rim protection, particularly when they were playing Real Madrid. He'd love to put him in to guard Tavares for a little while. I think there's more of a space for that there. I think obviously the Charlotte Hornets would like to see that a little bit more. That really doesn't matter to Barcelona's coaching staff and front office, but I do think there's an opening on that roster for him to play a few minutes every night and really shore up that back line. We may be too late in the season for it now, but it's something I would love to see them maybe try out the closing stretch at PET, especially if they get safe in that 2 seed. But couldn't agree more. Panathinaikos and Monaco definitely have a path to fight them for it. Any other closing thoughts on Barcelona, or we can move to the back end of this?
I just think that, of course, as you said, in order to really be a candidate for that Final Four, they still need to figure out some things defensively, especially at the rim. They've been pretty bad in some cases, so that's the focus that they need to work on. And hopefully, they can maintain a decent level of chemistry because, as I was saying before, there's been rumors about some, level of disconnection between some of the players and Coach Grimao. And of course, especially in the most important moments of the season, that kind of tension can play a factor.
I agree. Okay, so let's move to the back half, because when we start going through 3 through 15, we're going to start from 15. I mean, look, we can lump these two together. Alba Berlin and Asvel are the bottom 2 teams. I don't foresee anything changing there. I think if we spend more than 30 seconds talking about Asvel, anyone who's listening to this is going to stop. There's just, I mean, look, I like some pieces over there. I like watching Paris Lee play. I think he's a good player. Luawu Cabarro is a good player. There's no defined vision there. They really need to kind of start thinking about things long term, especially with the new arena, which they've swapped out of for some games because of ticket sales, which just isn't acceptable. I'm not going to get into how frustrating it is. They have an A license, some other teams don't. Who we are always discussed. Asvel is what it is. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add there, but if not, we can move.
To be honest, no. I mean, I couldn't agree more with what you said. I mean, there's no long-term vision. There's, the roster as it makes no sense with the way that it was built. You have some good elements, of course, as you said, but there's no consistency. There's nothing. They decided to bring in Pozzecco as the new head coach, knowing exactly that he wasn't Tony Parker's first choice because Tony Parker wanted the German national team head coach. And after less than 2 months, they decided to fire him because, to be honest, I still don't understand the reason. They brought in the assistant, Popé, but of course he's not going to change anything. The team was already bad. Pozzecco in 2 months won more games at the EuroLeague level than TJ Parker had won in an entire year. And I don't know what they were expecting, and what I always say is when you change 3 different head coaches in a span of less than a season, the problem is with the ownership, is not with the coaching staff. So,
yeah, absolutely. Couldn't be more correct. Alba Berlin, more of a soft spot there. Yeah. I am just generally down on Asvel for so many reasons. Alba, the talent just isn't there. We all knew that heading into the season, but there is a project, right? We know that they are always trying to play the long game. They're pretty much the only team in EuroLeague that is really focused on trying to bring in some younger players and kind of building a system around them, right? They've got the 2 young Italians on the wing this season, Matteo Spagnuolo and Gabriel Procida. I've liked watching them both. I mean, Spagnuolo's decision making already as a wing, his handle, it's really strong. It's really solid. If he can up his game as a scorer in that mid-range area a little bit, as a shooter, and become a slightly better finisher at the rim. I mean, he's still so young. Him and Procida, they're both still, especially for EuroLeague, they're so young. If Spagnuolo can improve on that part of his game to pair with the playmaking, he's got a really bright future either here or to the NBA if that ends up happening. The Timberwolves or whoever decide to bring him over. Procida, his build is fantastic, great length, great athleticism. He jumps out of the gym, he makes big plays. Similar to Spagnuolo, it's that consistency. Some nights the shot is falling, some nights it looks like it's barely touching the rim. But he gets out and plays. I think he's someone who's going to project to be able to defend, close to all 5 positions, really be a force on the perimeter on that end. If the shot is going down consistently and he can use that to open up the rest of the game, his future is bright. I like what I see from him. Johannes Tiemann's having a good season. They just don't have the talent. I mean, Tiemann's their only 5 on the roster. I'm not even sure, how confident I feel of him as like a 30-minute a game night as a EuroLeague 5. And again, he's having a good season, but anybody who's playing as much as he is, you really, really want to be at that top EuroLeague level. And I don't think he's there yet, even with his strong play. Matt Thomas and Sterling Brown are good players, but they're not going to carry a team into the playoffs. I like the vision. I like how it looks long term. If they're keeping Spagnuolo, Procida, even Luis Olinde, who's had some injury issues, right? If they can kind of keep some of the nice younger pieces close to their prime pieces for a few seasons and kind of keep working the rest of the core around that, there could be a season where they sneak into the playoffs, or at least they get in the play-in and maybe make some noise. They sell tickets in that arena still. They've got good fans. I like having Alba Berlin in EuroLeague. Obviously I want to see them step it up a little bit and make some more moves, but it's a project and a vision there, and I've got a lot of appreciation for that, and we need to reward that if we want more of that going forward and less of Asvel, just in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. With Alba is probably the only team at the EuroLeague level that really doesn't care about the motto, every game matters. For them, it's always about the long term. They are the only ones that really make investments in younger players, in long-term projects, even, knowing the fact that they're not going to be successful, right away. And it's their blessing, and at the same time it's a little bit of their curse, because in the last few years we still haven't seen that step up that they need to do in order to be really competitive for a playoff spot. And of course, some of the players, even the ones that have stayed there for multiple seasons, at some point they want to start to win something, and they want to move to a team that where they can be more competitive, like it happened with Luke Sigma, for example. So yeah, I mean, this season, pretty much everyone knew coming into the season that they were not going to be particularly competitive, even if they tried to had a bit more of experience and shooters with Matt Thomas and Sterling Brown, but the core of the roster is still pretty young. As an Italian, of course, I'm following as much as I can both Matteo Spagnolo and Gabriele Procida, and especially with Procida, I'm really happy with the progress that he's been making. As you said, very good frame, great athlete, great explosiveness, very good three-point shooter, can be streaky, and recently, Gigi Datome, who is now the chief of the delegation for the Italian national team, he said that at this stage of his career, Procida is readier than Datome was at that stage of his career. So that's a good, some good knowledge coming from a former veteran like Datome. So I'm really like the direction where Datome is heading, where Procida is heading. When it comes to Alba, of course, the position is going to be there until the end of the season. If they're not going to be the last team, they're going to be the second to last. But compared to Asvel, the situation to me, it's completely different, because they're very smart people in that front office, with Ignacio Ieda, and the rest of the front office is filled with very good executives. But they, in my opinion, they need to start thinking more about building a team that can be a little bit readier in the immediate, in order to be competitive next season. Because at some point, you start wondering, well, if we're going to end up in the last two position in every season, why we're doing this,
Yeah, agreed. I mean, especially, with the Euro Cup success they had before this, right? We know that if they fall into one of the secondary competitions, they can be a more top team. Valencia is a team like along a similar level, but has been able to come in and compete more for the playoffs. Again, leaning more into some more experienced players. But it's certainly a question I'm sure that front office is asking themselves. And I love Ojeda. I love what he's doing over there. I know when he was on Bennis's podcast, I don't know how long ago, but I remember he talked about their investment in youth and their belief in it. But the issue they're running into, and that, European basketball at large kind of has, and why they can somewhat capitalize on this, is that there is no U23 level for these guys.
Yeah.
And that's why we're struggling with players leaving to just go play college basketball in America, especially with the NIL money and things like that. G League Ignite was slightly an issue. It looks like not so much based on Adam Silver's recent comments, right? But Ojeda has opened up about that. And I think, look, it's not a discussion we can get into chapter and verse today that, there's other things we could get to, but, the fact that Procida and, Spagnolo, their best option to get high level repetitions, at this level of basketball at this age is to, join a team in EuroLeague that is going to struggle. That's really their option. That speaks more to a larger issue that I think, needs to be fixed in the long run. They have to figure out something to get those guys reps, or, I mean, they're just going to all go play college ball. That's what's going to happen. So after Alba, I have Zvezda, third to last. And look, they could definitely, jump into somewhere in the range probably of 12 to 15. I'm not going to deny that. The talent on that roster is still there. Milos Teodosic, Iago Dos Santos, Joel Bolomboy is having a very good season, right? They have good pieces, Nemanja Nedovic, Adam Hanga. I was really excited about this team coming into the season. I think I had them in top 6, somewhere like that. I had them locked into a playoff spot. I liked Dusko's fit with a lot of the roster. It was his guys. He brought back Rokas Gudritis, as he does, right? If Rokas Gudritis is available, Dusko Ivanovic is a head coach somewhere, where Gudritis is going to end up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So they look, and they had that, I know it was Asvel, but that opener with the crowd, they were shooting the lights out from three. And it was like, yeah, maybe Eurozio Cauchi isn't crazy and this team could make the Final Four. It looks like the pieces are there. And it's just been downhill ever since. There was the Shabazz Napier drama, which I'm sure you know way more about than me, but that was, from an outsider perspective, it was just like, again, there's another, another person said he wants to go to Milan, or another person says they have him texting that he wants to be back at Milan. Why did he come here? Did Zvezda not know about this? Red Star not know about this? What is really happening? And like I said, I mean, I was really bought in on the roster. They play Milos Teodosic and Iago dos Santos together way too much for my liking. I know there's been some injury issues there lately, so we've seen less of that. But I mean, from Dusko didn't play Iago at all, which was like a problem.
Yeah.
Safaropoulos came in and immediately Iago started to get minutes. But I mean, he plays the two of them together. And I don't see how you could think that, he's a great coach. I'm not saying like, this is something I know better or anything like that. But Iago is always going to be a defensive problem, even though he's a good defender for his physical limitations. He gets around screens really well. He's got great activity with his hands. He's got a good core, like he's like Campazzo a little bit and how he can impact the game on that end, where he's going to have problems, but it's not just an immediate bucket if you get him in the wrong situation. Teodosic, we know what he is at that end of the floor. I mean, you put him on but they played Monaco. They had him guard John Brown, who's, got 5-6 inches on him and way more athleticism, but they were still like, yeah, we'll just, let John Brown shoot long twos. And Brown made enough of them in that game. But, that's what we get at that end. So when you play two guys like that together, you are really setting up. I mean, a team's going to come after you in the pick and roll constantly.
Yeah.
Those two guys. It's very difficult to hold. They haven't really figured that out. They haven't figured out the lineups. They haven't figured out how to win on the road at all. That's been a struggle all season. I know they have a strong home court, but to really be a good EuroLeague team, and especially to at least make the play in this season, you have to be able to win some games on the road. Partizan is putting that to the test, but you have to a degree. And it's just, I like the roster. I think Safaropoulos deserves a summer and, the ability to see it going into next season. But it's just, hasn't connected all year. I don't see that changing in any significant way for the final 8 games.
Yeah, I agree. I think, a lot of people before the beginning of the season, they had a lot of hype around Zvezda because, as you said, the roster was really intriguing and, the potential was there. But at the same time, personally, I had a little bit of doubts about the fit, because when you put together a backcourt in which you have Teodosic, Nedovic, Iago dos Santos, Shabazz Napier, all these guys that really need the ball in their hands and, they're not exactly great defensive players, it's going to be challenging to make it work. Especially when the only real good defensive players that you have, they're just, you have Anga, who's had also, injury issues this season, is a very good defensive player, but is not a kid anymore. And, you thought that in the front court, some of the options that you already had, they were good and only a few additions could have made it better. But, Toby didn't really work so far with Zvezda. Bolomboy was probably the guy who came with less excitement. He turned out to be their best big man. They already signed a contract extension for him. And he has been impressive, to be honest. He has been their only consistent big man in terms of performances this season. But as I was saying, I think it was very difficult from the beginning because the chemistry wasn't there between the players. And as often happens especially with Serbian teams, there was a lot of backstabbing behind the scenes, So now the president of the team saying, Dushko, he didn't want this player and he signed a worse one. We wanted to sign Shima Moneke and he wanted Toby. We wanted to sign Marcus Howard from Baskonia and Dushko wanted another guy. When you put things in this perspective, it's very difficult to imagine that there's going to be a successful season because there are so many different voices inside the club. So the ownership wants something, the coaching staff wants something different. And also, when you bring in a guy like Milos, like Teodosic, even at this stage of his career, the aura that he has, is so big that is going to put a shadow on the other guys. Milos is still one of the best players in his role. It's one of the most creative point guards out there. But of course, you cannot, hold them too much defensively because it is always going to be an issue. Teams are going to attack him. But at the same time, he's not the type of player that you can play 10 minutes. Even at this stage of his career, it's just not going to happen, because he's Milos Teodosic, is especially for Serbian fans and for the Serbian environment, is much more than a basketball player. Is pretty much a living legend. So it's very difficult to have that kind of player in the roster. And as far as I know, the relationship that they had with Shabazz Napier, for example, he went south pretty quickly. And as you also noted, when Dushko was still the head coach, Dos Santos was not playing at all because, again, as far as I know, Dos Santos wasn't a request of Coach Ivanovic. It was something that the front office tried to bring in to have him also on a multi-year deal so that they could work, long-term on him. It was just too much confusion, too many things in the same place that they didn't have a great fit between each other. And we saw that on the court because there were some games in which Zvezda looked great and other in which there was no connection, there was no chemistry. And defensively, we saw all the issues that this team have. And Sfairopoulos, of course, is trying to fix some of that, but it's never easy when you come into the season, mid-season, you have to adapt to a roster that is not really yours, that it was built for another coach. And they had additional drama with the old Shabazz Napier situation. He wanted to go back to Milan and the interviews that Coach Messina had. In order to have a successful season, you need to have also a stable locker room and an environment around you that tends to protect you. And I think that these things were missing this season for Zvezda. And that's one of the main reasons why they're not going to be in the contention for a playoff spot.
Yeah. Look, I agree. And I think, what we're talking about, the constant, the turnover in head coaches, the lack of kind of defined who's calling the shots and putting together the roster. When you have all that going on and you have a player like Milos Teodosic is going to turn into the guy who takes a lot of shots and takes a lot of the possessions because, that's who he's Milos, right? And if you're concerned about anything, it's like, give him the ball, give him the ball. We're going to get out of the way and see what that happens. And in some ways, there's been some benefits to that. Like a big part of why Balamboy is having a good season is like, he's a fantastic pick and roll partner with Milos. And they found a fantastic 2-man game. But the other issues are like, look, Milos is 34. I wrote about this preseason. It was like, I liked their roster. I think a big part of it working is Milos needs to kind of take a back seat and change his role a little bit. And look, it's not that like you don't want Milos running pick and roll anymore. You don't want him taking guys off the dribble or shooting those quick one dribble pull-up threes. Like that's who he is. You want him to play his game. But last season with Bologna, his efficiency in the pick and roll really went down where he was still at that high level, was flying off screens as a shooter, like doing some of like what Bellinelli does. Not quite at the same level and a little different. He liked to take it and put the ball on the floor a lot, but that's a spot he was really good. I haven't seen a lot of that from Zvezda for him this season. It's very heavy on the ball handler reps and attacking from there and getting into the pick and roll, which again, he is good at, but at his age, he doesn't have the bursts that he used to. quick release three isn't there like it used to be. So he could be stopped in that situation more. He's always been turnover prone. It's just the offense, because it hasn't been defined of really how it's supposed to work. Different coach doesn't fit the roster. It falls into this Milos, centric offense, which just, I don't think, that's like that doesn't guarantee you a playoff spot like it used to. This isn't Cheska Milos. This is a different player who's still very good, but he's just not going to lead a high level EuroLeague team, especially with what he's giving up at the other end as well, as we touched on. So, okay, that gets us through, 1 through 2, 18, 17, 16. After that, it's all really close, as we all know. This is EuroLeague. This is how it goes. The standings really open right up. Anyone can kind of finish anywhere from this point. So we'll start at 15th. We're both kind of making our predictions. I went through, in the most recent article I wrote that came out a couple of weeks ago or late last week, went through each team's remaining schedule, picked out how I thought they were going to do in those games, and kind of projected their final finish. For awareness, I chalked up most people, if you have Madrid on your schedule, it's a loss. If you have Barcelona on your schedule, it's probably a loss, depending on who you are. Flip side, if you're playing Alba or Asvel, probably a win. Zvezda, if you're away against Zvezda, it's a different game. We could discuss it. But that was how I calculated a lot of this. So I'll kick us off. Orazio will go back and forth here for 15th. I'll say who I have. Then when we get to 14th, you can jump in. We spent a lot of time talking about the 5 settled teams, but we can move through the top half of this quickly until we get closer to the play-in. But so I in 15th had Bayern. I like Bayern. I like how it looks long-term with Lasso. I think Silva and Francisco and Leandro Balmaro, if they could keep those two as a backcourt for a few seasons, like, season 2 or 3 together, those two guys, that could be one of the best backcourts in EuroLeague, in my opinion. I love what Francisco has shown as a scorer, that big shot against Partizan. He's awesome. He moves quick. I just love, he glides with the ball. Bolmaro, he hasn't been the most impressive this season, but the glimpses are there. I think we all trust the EuroLeague talent is there. He needs some time. He needs to get more consistent with that. He takes that long two in the pick and roll way too much, and it drives me crazy. He does not make it at an efficient enough rate. But if that changes, we got a different ball game with him. Bolmaro is kind of that big creator. He can guard even some wing players with his size. Francisco is that scoring guard. They need to figure out the wings a little bit. That's been a weak point for them this season. Obviously, Lucic is injured, but also at Lucic's age, like, you should not be dependent on him anymore. I love him. He's one of my favorite players I've ever watched in this competition, but it's just, he's kind of past that. Nick Wheeler-Babb is great. I think that guy is, what he does for Bayern and what I think he could do for a lot of EuroLeague teams, it's like that Jerian Grant role where he can occasionally take some guys off the dribble, but he's really a spot up guy and he's happy to take on a tough defensive assignment every night, can guard multiple positions. Those 3 I really like. The rest of the roster has some good pieces, but the wings, they haven't figured out. Lucic, Giffey is good player, but he's not somebody you want playing a ton of minutes. Devin Booker at the 4. Yeah, Ibaka at the 5 has had his moments, but he's Serge Ibaka. He's old. His back still has issues. He can't give you the minutes you need every night. He just can't over the course of the season. He's not that guy anymore. There are some nights where he can only give you 10 to 15. And if you're counting on him for more than that regularly, he's going to see a drop in play. So they have some good pieces long-term. I think that's why they've had some very impressive performances this season. Pablo Lasso's resume speaks for itself. If they're invested there long-term with this roster, I think we're going to see them in a Final Four probably at some point under Lasso if he's there for a few seasons. It's not this season for me. And, I have them finishing in 15th. Who do you have 15th? What do you think of Bayern? Feel free to take that either way.
Yeah, no, I agree on the position. I have them also in 15. And, as you said, this is the first season under Coach Lasso's project now. And I think pretty much everyone expected them to be not a playoff team this season because it's still too early. They still need to make several adjustments. And there's some interesting elements, of course. As you're saying, his rookie season at the EuroLeague level for Francisco has been really, really good. He's an exciting player, very entertaining to watch. I've always been a fan of Bolmaro with his ability also to put his teammates in rhythm, can defend multiple positions, is a really interesting player. Probably not the star that you can build around, but a very solid foundation piece for your team. And Carson Edwards has had his moments, and scoring off the bench. That's what he does. But overall, this is a team that is still far from potentially contending for a playoff spot, at least this season. As you said, Ibaka was a nice addition, but he's in the final stage of his career. He has health issues, of course. You cannot use him like 30 minutes per game, and he's had some really nice games. He has been important, but it's in my opinion, is a one-time addition. It's not something that you can do consistently. So I think there is reason to be optimistic for the incoming future. But for this season, I think that's the position that they're gonna head to. 15. I agree on that position. I think that's where they're gonna land, because they're being kind of inconsistent in terms of performances. So that's the range as of right now.
Yeah. I mean, look, if they get a late season surge of consistency, right? Like, it can happen. But I doubt it. I'm trying to pull up their schedule here. What they've got for some of these games. Yeah, I mean, they got a home game against Red Star. They're going away to Efes, Valencia, and then also Monaco. But, their home game against Zalgiris, that's going to be a big one, obviously. And as we discussed, there's been flashes this season, so sure, they could spring it all together for a late stretch of games here, but they haven't done that yet. It would seem unfair to kind of bank on that. Moving to 14, so I have Valencia, and look, they have been. I remember watching this team in one of their early ACB games this season on the road against Malaga, when they made a third quarter comeback and won that game, and I was like, oh, there's something here. There is something here. They've got great basketball culture over there. They've built a roster that is consistent. It's very physical. It really, it mucks the game up. That's what they have a lot of guys doing, is who just get out there, and it's like, their goal is to just mess shit up. Like, that's how they play basketball. Sometimes even on the offensive end. Chris Jones is a good guard. He can lead offenses, but they still they just never found like that consistent perimeter scoring option. And that's really hurt them. Their best offense comes from like Jones Davies pick and roll, which isn't creating a lot of threes. It can get them enough buckets to stay in a game. Damian Inglis kind of plays off that. Davies likes to run this high-low game, which like maybe I spaced this with where Davies was in like Barcelona and Zalgiris, or and Milano. Maybe I just forgot, but he is a much better passer than I remember. There are times where I watch him this season, and he is really moving the ball properly, and I'm very impressed with him. So and their defense speaks for itself. I love the way they defend. I wrote this. It seems like something they do defensively is, a lot of teams have this scheme of, we switch everything, or we only switch ball screens, or, we're doing a lot of hedge and recover. Valencia seems like it looks like they go into games with the scouting report, and it's like, this guy's guarding this guy, and we're only switching to get that matchup back. Like, we want our best defenders on their best opposing players, and we think if we could do that, we can scrap and stay in a game. They just haven't done it enough this season. You need to score enough points to win games. They have not done that. Again, I like a lot of the pieces here. It's a really fun team to watch in an ugly way. But I don't see a position higher than 14th for them. And look, maybe we're wrong. Maybe something changes, but that's where I've got him.
Yeah, personally at 14, I had Efes. But as you mentioned, in this, especially in this position, everything is pretty close. I put Efes at 14 mostly because I really don't trust their defense. It is a really talented team, but defensively, they've been really, really bad this season. Like really, really bad. I mean, in terms of defensive rating, they're even worse than Asvel, which is not a good sign at the EuroLeague level. And so I had Efes at 14, mostly because really I don't trust their defense, despite the fact that they have some real talent offensively. And despite the fact that with the hiring, with the promotion as a head coach of their assistant, they look better in the last few games. They look better. They got a couple of nice wins against Milan, against Maccabi Tel Aviv, but still, I think that they're kind of they're the team that always need to score one more than the others, and their defense really can save their lives, and that's an issue that I think it's going to cost them a lot. Also, in the last few games of the regular season. When it comes to Valencia, which you mentioned before, I believe that, as you said, they have a great defensive system in place. They really make you play in a poor way. That's their top quality as a team. But offensively, they don't have enough talent. They don't have enough firepower. And especially in the backcourt, they really lack a true point guard that can elevate their game, because of course Chris Jones is more of a combo guard. In my opinion, to really shine, he needs a better point guard close to him, and neither Jared Harper or the arrival of Kevin Pangos really changed the situation up to this point. And as far as I know, they're going to part ways with both of them at the end of the season, both with Jared and Kevin. So that's one of the main issue, because even, they decided to bring in this summer Brandon Davis and Ojeleye from Virtus and from Milan. And despite the fact that they had some nice moments, offensively, they didn't bring the firepower that probably the team was expecting from them. And offensively, there's just not enough rhythm. There's not enough creation, and it's kind of predictable, their way of play offensive basketball. And this is something that ultimately, they're probably going to cost them the possibility of fighting for a playoff spot.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Look, I like Harper a little bit, but similar. But he's not a point guard. He's like a scoring guard. He's two guard in like a really small guard's body. I think that's his downside. Pengos just isn't the guy he used to be. I think that much is clear these days. Look, when they have like Davies, Inglis, and Ojeleye out there all at once, it looks terrifying. It looks like if I had to run an offense against that, I'd be like, I don't know, we're shooting pull-up threes for the next 3.5 minutes, and hopefully one of these guys comes out of the game, because that's how they move. On Efes, to be clear on this point, and you're probably in a similar spot. These next three teams I have, Valencia, I have Efes 12. They have the same record. They're 15-9, 15-19. I could be missing a tiebreaker thing. I looked at the tiebreakers of the play-in spots and stuff, not towards the bottom. So you may be correct. I may technically actually have Efes 14th and not even know it. Efes, same boat. They can't guard anybody. It's atrocious. They're still trotting lineups out there with Darius Thompson, Shane Larkin, and Rodrigo Bois, all three of them at the same time, which great offense. I don't know who of those three guys is stopping anybody. Thompson is passable. Bois has his moments, but Larkin's pretty much done on that end of this career. And look, I really liked Erdem Can. I hope he gets another EuroLeague shot somewhere soon. I think he is no doubt a high-level coach for this competition. That'll prove over time. What he did with Turk Telecom the season before was fantastic. His resume speaks for itself. I think even with this short little boost in play, not to criticize anyone too much, I do think too much stock was put into, Shan working with a roster that is just not his. They have so much money still tied up in Clyburn, Larkin, Beaubois, the old guard, the guys who brought them to EuroLeague titles, the guys who deserve those contracts they have, right?
Yeah.
Who've been a part of great success there, a great era for that club. So I understand it, but and I know they made some nice moves this season, going out and grabbing Darius Thompson, the best point guard on the market, right? Like you expect more from that, no matter who the coach is. But I really felt he was a guy they should have looked at of like, we can't assess him fairly until, he's kind of built more of this core. Like Larkin and Beaubois could still be there. Clyburn in particular is the main one. I mean, he's 35, almost 36 now. His age is really caught up and you just see it. He just doesn't move like he used to. He's had the injuries too, which is a shame because, I mean, he was like the best 3-4 tweener scorer this competition had for a stretch. And that part of his game has just left. So I'm with you on FS. I see it. I think as they move, if they nail this transition over the years, moving away from these guys, bringing in the right pieces around them, they could be back to a top level, but they're always going to struggle with this. So I had FS 12th. We talked about them in Valencia. So I'll give you my team in 13th now. Or actually, how about you give me your team in 13th? Who do you got next?
So at 13, I had Valencia. So we already mentioned them. I mean, I saw that you put Milan, but again, in this position, it's very close. Do you want to start with Milan, or you want me to talk about them? Because
you start with Milan. You start with Milan. Yeah.
Okay, because there's plenty to say. I mean, it's very difficult to understand what's going on because, of course, they started this season again with the expectation that they're going to be a potential Final Four contender. I mean, they recruited Nikola Mirotic, who was probably the most coveted free agent in European basketball. I mean, pretty much everyone took a shot at Mirotic this summer. Partizan, the Greek teams, everyone tried, but in the end, he decided to go for Milan, and they added some other, nice pieces potentially with Poitres, with Kamagate, but once again, the original sin was, we're going to start the season with Kevin Pangos as the starting point guard. That's where, they lost faith pretty quickly. The relationship between him and Messina was already not in a good place, but after a few weeks, it just went south. Of course, they did try to bring some different players in the backcourt over the summer. I mean, they tried to sign Darius Thompson, but then the price, skyrocketed, and they tried to keep Napier, but then Zvezda came in with this very big offer and the player decided to go to Belgrade, although he was thinking about staying. But I think it's pretty natural that as a professional, when you receive a bigger offer, you're going to go for the bigger offer, despite the fact that you might have some doubts about the environment, the fit. But these guys are professionals, so if someone offers you more money, most likely you're going to get that offer. But as I was saying, they started to have issues right away in terms of offensive chemistry. The first games were, where they were tough to watch because, the only offensive option, it looked like it was, let's give the ball to Mirotic and let's see what happens, and I mean, I understand that when you have Mirotic, you try to use him as much as you can because he's such a good offensive player. He can do so many things in the post, on the perimeter, he's such a versatile player. But to me, it was really difficult to understand how do you think it could have been sustainable to keep playing with this very big lineup using Mirotic, Voigtman, Melli, all together. And in the backcourt, you have Pangos and Maudolo, and they wanted to use Billy Barron, of course, but Billy Barron has never been available pretty much this season because of his elbow injury. I really didn't understand how they think it was sustainable to play that way, because defensively it was a wreck, because they often use Mirotic as number 3, and Mirotic as number 3, he can guard anyone. Simple as that. He's such a fantastic player offensively, but defensively, especially if he has to defend against smaller player, quicker player, he has no chance. Simple as that. And I think they also, at some point during the season, they made things even worse internally, with Coach Messina going out there and giving interviews that he should have never given in the first place. Because he started to receive criticism about his double role, because he's both the head coach and the president of basketball operations. So he's literally the one in charge for every single roster decision in the team. And when he started to receive those criticism, he went to the reporters that criticized him for the double role, invited over to lunch, and gave them an exclusive interview. And one of those interviews backfired on him, because he was that interview where he talked about Shabazz Napier. He wanted to come back, and he's sending texts to his friends that he wants to go back to Milan. And actually, after that interview came out, Messina said, I didn't really say those things. It was more of a joke that the reporter interpreted as something that I really said, And of course, the interviews created a lot of drama in the media around Messina. At some point there were people saying, "Oh, he's going to step down as head coach. He's not going to continue until the end of the season." And in that moment, the club announced the contract extension until 2026, which it was weird, because Coach Messina actually signed that extension right after they won the Italian league last season against Virtus Bologna. It's just that they never announced it. Up to that point, they never announced it officially. Sometimes in terms of how dealing with media and public perception, Milan can be a very particular team. It's something that I learned over the years. And so overall, it has been a very weird season for them. They potentially still have the possibility to get at least into the play-in, but I just don't trust them, because every single time I thought, oh, okay, they're turning the page around, they're about to change their season, then they come 2 horrible performances right away, one after the other, where they have no idea how to run an offensive set in a proper way. And there is also this tendency that they have, that they play great in the first half, and when they come back in the second half, they look like a completely different team, flat, with no energy, making silly mistakes, stupid turnovers. And I just don't trust them enough to be a playoff team, because they've been inconsistent this entire season. I mean, even recently in the final 8 of the Italian Cup, they had the potential to win it. Great matchup in the final against a team that was supposed to be not as good as them, like Napoli, and they lost it. They approached the game in a very poor way. Napoli just played better from the beginning to the end of the game, and that's why I don't trust Milan, because they are too inconsistent. And despite the fact that potentially they have the talent to be one of the best teams in Europe, they just don't have the consistency to do it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love the part of the Napier saga with after the Messina interview came out, and they were pretty much like, yeah, I was joking. And I was like, what was the joke there, man? Like, what was the funny part of what you said to that? Like, how would anyone interpret, Yeah, he wanted to come back here. Like, how would anyone interpret that as like, yeah, I was just joshing around, man. I was just cracking jokes. Yeah, that was really interesting. I couldn't agree. I mean, I remember when they signed Mirotic this summer. Look, as we said, there's always a reason to sign Nikola Mirotic.
Yeah,
He's, the best player on the market. But
yeah,
when he came in, like my first quote was like, okay, what does this mean for Nicolo Melli? Because those are not two guys you can play together.
no.
They like you're either moving one of them to the 3 or one of them to the 5, which neither of them are built to play. Um, so, I do think if they come back next season with most of this roster and maybe sort out some of those things, add some more versatility pieces around instead of more of the same, right? But because, like, I mean, Napier, Hall, Shields, Mirotic, one of Poitras or Voigtman, that's a really good 5-man lineup.
Yeah.
That's a top 5-man lineup in Europe right there. That's one of the most talented offensively. There's good defense there. You put Poitras back there as the rim protector. He could fortify that thing. Like, that's a Final Four level lineup if they can establish the consistency and stay healthy, right? So if they come back with that next season, I think we're talking about Milan in a very different way. But right now, it's been too much of their season has been about what's happened off the court, and you can't afford that. If it was all about basketball and what's happening on the court, maybe we feel differently about them, but it just hasn't gotten that way. All right, so we're through 15 through 12. We're now at the last spot before the play-in, and I'll let you kick us off. Who do you have in 11th, Orazio?
I have Zalgiris.
Oh, okay, yeah. Let's
Yeah.
go ahead. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about Trinchieri's turnaround.
Yeah, it's been amazing, to see them playing after the arrival of Coach Trinchieri. I mean, I had hopes that he could turn around the situation, but I didn't think he could have done it, that fast, to be honest, and that good, because they've been really good on the court. They've been a very exciting team to watch, and that's why I trust them so much, because I think they're gaining this momentum and they're riding this momentum. And historically, Zalgiris has always been a tough team to play against when they play at home, because they have such a great home factor. Their arena is always filled, is always crowded with people. There's huge passion. And but now they also have a coach who really understands that kind of environment, that is able to create that connection. That is something that Trinchieri has always been very good to do it, because he did it when he was with Partizan. He did it when he was with Bamberg. He's great when he has to create that connection with not only with the fans but with the entire environment. He really embraces the culture of the team, and is also such an intoxicating personality, that he has, because he's always very funny. He's as a reporter, I always say he's a quote machine, because every single time that he does a press conference, there's always something interesting to extract from that press conference. I mean, after the first win that he had in Kaunas, he said this thing about the chat that he has with some of his Italian friends and former players, and he played this Italian song, and he became immediately like the anthem for the team. It's great in elevating the morale of a team. And Zalgiris needed that, because they were kind of in a depressing part of their season. Things weren't going well. They were thinking about letting Keenan Evans leave into the middle of the season, because he was receiving offers from Barcelona, from Milan. There were teams that were interested in having him. And in the end, they decided to keep him, and that was great for them, because Keenan, of course, is their star. Without him, he wouldn't be the same team. He became one of the best guards in the EuroLeague, which is something that, I mean, it wasn't that easy to predict, I think, especially after his first season that he had with Maccabi. He had some nice moments, but that connection between him and Wilbekin, it never really worked in that environment. But then, last season, he was already amazing before the injury. Then, unfortunately, he had the injury, so his season was cut short. And this season he came back and he looks even better than last season, which is impressive because he had a pretty severe injury. That is usually the type of injury that turns you into a different kind of player. But for him, it wasn't like that. And they're playing really good defense. Offensively, they've been really fun to watch. They're sharing the ball. Of course, they use Keenan as kind of a closer in the tough moments of the game because he can take responsibilities. He can make the big shots. And I just put them in the 11th position because I believe that they are riding this momentum, and as of right now, they're one of the most difficult teams that you can face at the EuroLeague level.
Yeah. So I have Zalgiris 10th. My 11th is Baskonia, but I'll stay on Zalgiris here to start, and then we can pivot to Baskonia. First of all, the main change like that I see from Trinchieri, there's been a few of them, but I mean it's pretty clear that like he got there and he just like found Keenan Evans and was like, hey, you shoot whenever you want. Just whenever you want. You get if you want to get a shot up, you can take it. Which I love, right? Because I think a guy who's as skilled as Evans is, like, he's falling into that category of, your Mike James, your Shane Larkins, your really impressive guards who they are so good that as a coach, even though it's going to drive you crazy, you always want a good shot. There should be 3 or 4 times a game where they take a shot where you're like, oh my God, that's a terrible shot. 7 seconds into the shot clock, contested, hoisted 3, but they make enough of them, especially if they get hot, where you're like, yeah, like let it fly. Sometimes that's the best possession for us. He's given Evans like all the leeway in the world, which he deserves, especially with what else is around him there. Not to diminish the talent, but their offense is only going to work if Evans is having a good game. They need him scoring the ball, which means he needs to be able to let it fly. I love Thomas Dimsa. He is like my sneaky guy who I watch and I'm like, I think this guy could play in the NBA. I love how he moves on the perimeter and lets it fly. He's probably a little too frail and like just doesn't quite have the athleticism, but I really like his game. He's a crafty finisher at the rim. Like there's a few times where I'm watching him and he is like, offhand, wrong foot, like flicking the ball in off the glass. And I'm like, how did he make that shot? When did he develop that? He's really good. I like him. Barutis, it's been awesome. Like Trinchieri's made that change where he starts him at the 5 and he is just connecting with Evans in that pick and roll. He's got that little push shot that like he before he even catches the ball, he's somehow shooting it. That's really difficult to guard. Hayes comes in off the bench and is just like an energy machine now. He's running all over the place. I like how it works. Roland Smits, everyone, if you've followed me or read anything, I love Roland Smits. He is to me surefire NBA level player, could come in and space the floor for teams. He rebounds well. He's got some post game. I think he's not as fast as you want anyone to be, obviously, but I think he actually moves his feet better than people give him credit for. Yeah, look, it is. I have them in 10th. I have them completing the turnaround to sneak into the play-in under Trinchieri. But, as this last batch of teams was tied in record for everyone, like I have Baskonia 11th, Zalgiris 10th, and then the next team I have in 9th, they're all 3, again, the same record, 17-17. That's how close it is. And I've got Zalgiris ahead just barely on a tiebreaker. So I have an 11th. That's it. That's it for me on Zalgiris. I love the new basketball under Trinchieri. I think they can pull it off. They do it's a tough final 8 games. Like they really need to keep playing at this level for all 8 games. The good thing they have going for them is they do play Real Madrid, but I think it's the end of the season. It's the final game. So there's a chance Real Madrid is resting their stars and they can actually grab a win against Real and like a big spot. We'll see if that actually happens. So 11th, I have Baskonia. And again, this has been an interesting team this year. I don't know how you felt about them going into the season, but I remember I watched one of their early ACB games against Murcia, who's having a great season, by the way. Please don't take this as me being like, oh, they lost to Murcia has been awesome. They've looked like almost a EuroLeague level team at times this year over there. But they, was watching them and like there was no offense outside of Marcus Howard. Like if he did not get going from the perimeter, the entire game was closed off. I remember one of their early games under Penarroya. I can't remember exactly who they were playing, but they were in a timeout and like Penarroya was saying, like it was late in game. They needed offense. And he was like, you know, Cody runs the pick and roll. That's going to pull some defense and you'll be able to find Howard for a three. And like Cody just said in the timeout, he was just like, hey man, they're going under everything. Like we can run pick and roll all you want, but like it doesn't work. Like they're just going under on me and I can't get to the rim. So nothing opens up. And they just stuck with it. They ended up losing the game. And they were 1-4. They brought in Dusko. They had the immediate Dusko bounce, shot right back up the table into the playoff fight. Their defense hardened like right away. You know, that was clearly the first thing Dusko did was like he went in there, he saw Cody, and he was like, "You're an animal on this end. Just cover everyone like a maniac." They started to blitz a lot more pick and rolls. They became a little more comfortable in their hedge and recover game, which has been great. Like that's what like Sedekirskis is pretty good at that. If he's in the weak side corner, he really knows how to get over and help on the roll man and get back in time. He's got good size. He comes back and rebounds and closes possessions for them. He's a really impactful player. And on the offensive end, you know, like I don't think Dusko has done anything special. I don't mean that as a disservice to him. Really all he's done is he makes sure Cody is surrounded with spacing. Monarchy, Howard, Marinkovic, Kavopoulos, who's finally kind of finding his groove at this level, right? And when he has that spacing, now Cody can get his north-south stuff going. Now he can get downhill and attack the rim where he's better, where he can finish, where he's got good length and strength when he goes to attack the basket. And it opens up the shooters. It lets Howard get going. It lets Monarchy get going. It's made it work. You know, I have them finishing 17-17, and they're just going to get pushed out on the tiebreaker. They have a round 30 game against Partizan Belgrade. That is going to be like very likely like contender game of the season. Yeah. You know, like that game is going to be everything to both of those teams. It's in Belgrade. If Baskonia can win, they own the tiebreaker. I think if Partizan wins, I think Partizan is like +2 or something on them or -2. If Partizan wins, you know, by 3 points or so, then they take the tiebreaker back. And that's probably going to determine those play-in spots. So I have liked what I've seen from this team since Dusko came into charge. I don't think it's been anything super revolutionary. I think it's very much he did what he does. He came in and he was like, this is how we're going to defend. This is how we're going to score. We're going to do this every night. And that's how we're going to win basketball games. And he's got them all to buy in. What do you have? I guess, who did you have 10? If you know,
I had Baskonia 10. Baskonia 10.
So let's get into it. What do you think of Dusko's boys?
I mean, when he came in to replace Penaroya, I mean, the Penaroya thing, I don't know why they started the season with him, because they already tried to replace him in the summer. They were very close to hire Luca Banchi, you know, this summer, but they wanted to have him right away, you know, to leave pretty much the Latvian national team right before the beginning of the World Cup. And, you know, Coach Banchi wanted to finish his job with the Latvian national team. So he turned down that offer. But they had really little confidence in Penaroya. And I think it was pretty clear from the beginning, things were not working. Last season, they were very fun to watch offensively, but that offensive groove kind of disappeared. You know, it was all about Marcus Howard and nothing else. And some of the additions, of course, that they tried to make during the summer, they didn't really work, like Mannion. And so they clearly needed a change, and Ivanovic was probably the best option to bring that change because, of course, it's someone who really knows that environment very, very well. He's been there multiple times already. And as you said, you know, he brought immediately great stability. Okay, guys, we're going to do very few things, very simple, but we're going to do them consistently. And he started to use in a much proper way Cody Miller-McIntyre, who, you know, in some ways there's always some doubts, like he's not really a EuroLeague level player. It is if you use him in the right way, you know, and he's a great defensive player. He knows how to find his teammates offensively if you put him in the right system. And we saw that. I mean, he had a 20 assist game. It's a fantastic player if you use him in the correct way. and Marcus Howard is being himself, and they had a certain type of growth from some players. I mean, Sedekerskis has been fantastic this season, especially when it comes to rebounding situations. He's been a machine, and that's why also they're trying to really, really hard to extend his contract because he's such an important player to them right now. And it's a team that has completely changed his defensive mentality. They're now a much better defensive team, and they have players who are all over the place. Of course, like Chima. Also they create that energy that this team really needs, because Baskonia has always been a very high energy team, and when they have that energy, they become a much better team. And that's why, I believe that for me, it was very close between them and Partizan for that 10-9 spot. I decided to put them 10 just because, Partizan head coach is Željko Obradović. And to me, Obradović is probably the best European coach ever. But it's gonna be very, very close. I think that the difference between them, it's Partizan, is really, really limited. So it's gonna be a very close call.
Monarchy's been really, really interesting to me. I wrote about him earlier this season. He's a very skilled offensive player. His catch and shoot and like one dribble pull up has really improved this year. And I mean, he is unstoppable in transition at this level. When they find him breaking down the wing, slashing down the wing, like that's it. That's 2 points, or he's getting fouled and he's going to the line. He's been really good, really impressive. He does have, I remember when I watched him when he was playing well, I was like, why does Dusko not start him? But like, if you watch him on the defensive end, you could see why Dusko does not start him. There are times where he just stopped paying attention. Like he was just like, we'll just find out if my guy's going to make that shot. Like that's his approach to defense. Sometimes it looks like, and look, like he's giving his all on the other end of the court. He's in that game to score and put points on the board. Like it'd be nice if he was 1000% locked in on defense all the time, but that's really hard. That's a hard lift on a player. And he's also the type of guy who like, he has the athleticism where even when he's not locked in, he can still make a play on that end. And I think that's kind of his approach. Yeah, I mean, I remember their game against Panathinaikos when Miller made the game winner. I pulled some clips from that. He had a few like defensive decisions in that fourth quarter where like he was making shots, but on the other end, he was almost giving them points right back. He like switched with Howard on a Mitoglu pick and roll, and he just like told like Marcus to go guard Mitoglu in the post, and it was like, what are you doing, man? Like, you can't do that. Like Marcus can't go down there. I would love to, I hope Dusko stays there. It's going to be really interesting to see what their roster is like next season, because he's really maximized what they have right now. It's tough to figure out exactly what they're going to need to add going forward, especially with, how they're limited in their own budget, and how much they struggle to fit, the domestic requirements at times. But it's fun. There's great intensity. If they get into the playoffs, they get in the play-in. I have them just on the outside looking in. It, hurts me to write. I know that would hurt those fans. But if they get in, they're going to be tough. Like, I don't think anybody wants to deal with that team in a 5-game playoff series. Like, you don't want to go to Fernando Buesa. You don't want, like, Marcus Howard and Monarchy could just show up in a road game and say, we're putting up 24, 25 points each. We're going to scrap the other 20. And we're going to beat you up. And like, that's what we're going to win this game 70-68. We're going to go back to our place and see if we can win 2 in a row. So yeah, I had Zalgiris 10th, as we discussed. And then my final 17-17 team in 9th, is Partizan. So look, we talked about it. I'm in the same boat as you. Like, they have not been playing good basketball lately. Not even close, actually, if we're being honest. I'm just never going to bet against Željko Obradović, like figuring it out in the closing stretch. It is the same way. I made a mistake one of the first seasons I was really into EuroLeague ball. Olympiacos and Efes faced each other in the playoffs. It was those Thomas Hurtel, Efes teams. And I remember, they had that series and I picked Efes. I thought they had too much athleticism. I thought they had enough talent. And it was just like, don't bet like Spinola, don't bet against Spinolas. Don't just, he's going to figure out a way to win a ball game, which he did. That's exactly what happened in that playoff series. I learned my lesson there. I'm applying it to Obradović here. I know this team has been up and down. They've been a little too dependent on PJ Dozier at times, which like he's just not ready for that level of responsibility in this competition. That's okay. He's young. It's his first year here. Nunnally has had a great season, but again, like it's not always there when they need it. Punter has really struggled. Like for him, like his numbers are still like okay, but it has not been the Kevin Punter like we saw at the end of last year, who had, Real Madrid on the brink, right? Where closing stretch of the game, Obradovic puts the ball in his hand and it's like, hey, bring us home. And he says, sure, yeah, I got us. That guy just hasn't been here. He's had injury problems as well. I think it's pretty clear that injury problems have affected his overall fitness. He just doesn't have that top level rhythm. Zach Ledee has not been great. He had like one stretch where he was playing like the old Zach Ledee this season. Outside of that, it's been very inconsistent. Caboclo was great when he first joined. Teams have really kind of figured him out. It looks like, they needed a few games of film and how Partizan was using him. And ever since then, they've kind of like, they know how to cut him out of the pick and roll. He's not a good passer. He just doesn't, Lesort had that element of he would run over people. Like if you got in the way of what he wanted to do, he would literally just run over you and get to the rim still. Caboclo has not like shown that yet. He's physical, he's imposing, but he's not in the same way. It's like he doesn't make it as big a part of his identity as Lesort did. And I think that is more than anything what Partizan needed in the next Lesort replacement, was a guy who just truly, his presence out there is so imposing on the game physically, and they haven't found it. But like I said, it's an Obradovic team. They've got enough home games here to close this out, and they play Alba Berlin and Asvel, I believe. I think both of them. Like, if they don't get enough wins to get in to sneak into the play-in, it's going to shock me. It will truly shock, even with the basketball they've been playing lately. What have you seen from Partizan this season? I know it sounds like we're kind of on a similar page here, but what else do you think about their ability to close the season?
Yeah, no, I agree with most of you said. They've been very. I think one of the issues is that they've been very nervous this season. Like they weren't able to handle the pressure in a lot of clutch moment situation. They made very stupid mistakes for a team that has already, I would say, plenty of experience, at this level. They didn't manage those situations really well, which is really strange for a team coach like by Zeljko Obradovic. They've been really nervous. I've seen, Zach Ledee always all over the place. I mean, he's a very high energy guy. He has always been that kind of player. But this season, I always see him, complaining with the referees and, always on the verge of getting a technical foul and stuff like that. So I don't know where this, tension comes from, but it's something that they need to try to get rid of it in this final part of the regular season if they want to get that playing spot. As you said, I put them in this position because at the end of the day, I don't want to take a risk against Obradovic because he's such a great head coach. But I think they also had this issue that they started the season with a very short roster because they were still looking for a couple of additions and they only made them during the season, like Caboclo, for example. And they added Jalen Smith later from Virtus. But they still lack a real point guard. Last season, Axum was their de facto point guard. They're trying to replicate that with PJ Dozier in a way, although, as you said, probably Dozier is still not ready for that because this is his first season. And despite the fact that he's good, I don't think he's as good as Dante Axum was for that team. And defensively, sometimes they have some moments in which they kind of disconnect, and it's kind of silly to see because they could be much better because they have very good defensive player in that team, but sometimes it's just like they're not on the same page. So I still believe in them. I still believe they're going to be at least in the play-in, but from the way they've been playing, especially in the last few weeks, there's definitely something that they need to fix, because overall in the last few weeks they've been difficult to watch. Those games have not been entertaining to watch, and there's definitely some to fix. But again, at the end of the day, this is a Željko Obradović team, so I think they will find a way to figure it out.
Yeah. Look, the defense that you talked about is a really good point. Look, to be clear, like I think what we're both saying on Dozier is like he's definitely a EuroLeague player. Like that, like his talent is there right away. That much is clear.
Absolutely.
The game management, the late game, that's what's not there yet. He doesn't have those reps of like closing a game, bringing it home, making sure they're getting good shots. And I think something you really miss, Exum left this summer. So did Jan Madar. So there was 2 point guards and 2 guys who like were top tier defenders for the point guard position as well. And Avramovic has not been healthy this season. Like that's been bothersome. But even when he has, like his defensive intensity hasn't been there. Like I feel like watching him, like Alexa has become a much better scorer. And as he's become a better scorer, he's been like, oh, this is way more fun than the guy I was for the seasons before this.
Yeah.
Picking up full court all the time and like being a hustle player. This is way more fun. I like taking pull-up threes, which like I don't blame him. I think we would all agree as players. But they, to your point, like one, credit to Ognan Yermaz, who's a player I've never thought too highly of, had question marks about his ability to really impact the game at the EuroLeague level. He also got off to a slow start this season. He has been like in the games that they win or where they have big runs, he is often in the like on the court making plays during those runs. And it's because he's really committed to that defensive end. And I think he has also kind of been a leader offensively and trying to make sure they're getting better shots and keeping the game at a pace that's more controllable. So he has really impressed me this season. And I think that's a problem. All the other talent they have at what Yarmaz does, him having to play as big a role as he had, be as integral as he had to their victories, is not the system they want. So that needs to change. Again, a Obradović team, but like punter, they definitely have to get the defense on the same wavelength that it was last year, where they could switch a lot. They had a lot of versatility. Like Dozier's got similar build to Exum. Defense is about more than physicality for sure, but he should be able to impact the game a little bit more at that end. If they can figure that out, and if Punter or Leday, really, if just one of them can find that offensive rhythm again, I think they're back to being a handful. But yeah, look, they've disappointed this year. I think they're still going to get in. If somebody draws them in a playoff series, similar to Baskonia, it's not going to be a fun 5-game series. Obradović, I think last season was like the first time he ever lost in the playoffs, or one of the very few times in his career. Yeah. Usually if he gets in the playoffs, he gets to the Final Four, right? So if they draw him again, even if it's Real Madrid, like I'm sure they're not looking forward to that. Yeah. Orazio, thank you for the extended stay, my friend. This has been over 2 hours, just so everyone knows. I asked for an hour of Orazio's time, and he has been generous, as always, and been willing to stay on for longer. I think we'll keep this one episode. I may break it up into 2. I'll let you know how I decide to edit it on the back end. But before we sign off, Orazio, anything to plug? What's your Twitter handle? Where are you working at? What are you working on right now?
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, man. It was a real pleasure. You can find me on BasketNews. I'm a reporter for BasketNews.com in Italy. I also contribute to Backdoor Podcast, and my Twitter handle is at Paxer89. So you can find me there. I am always pretty active on Twitter, so that's where my main environment is on social media.
Fantastic. Orazio, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for listening to the first episode of the Euroball podcast. We will talk to you again soon. Take it easy.